Hi there. Welcome back to the Reel Film Chronicles. As always, I'm Nathan.
And I'm Brian.
And in today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at a little film called The Gray Man.
A little film which cost Netflix $200 million to produce. This ties Netflix's record with the Red Notice. Did you check out Red Notice?
I've seen about 75% of Red Notice. I still have to see the end. It's one of those.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's one of the few movies where I had no desire to finish the rest of it, and that, like, you know me, Brian. Like, I'll sit through everything and anything. But Red Notice, I was watching it with my son because he loves The Rock. Dwayne Johnson and like Ryan Reynolds. So like to see them together, and for the record, my son. He's 11 right now, so forgive his tastes. But he was super interested in that, and we were watching it. I think we were up. It was around Christmas time. We were up at my in-laws, and we had it on. And it got to it was like 3/4 through. They were in the jungle looking for some treasured Nazi bunker or some nonsense. And we turned it off, and I just never went back and finished it.
You're not missing too much, really.
Yeah.
So, like, The Gray Man, this is the latest film by the Russo brothers, Anthony Russo and Joe Russo, who reach worldwide fame with their direction of the Avengers films, specifically Infinity War and Endgame, as well as I think maybe both of the Captain America or all three of them. I don't know how many Captain Americas there are. 3 of them, I think. They might have directed 1 or 2 of them.
They did Civil War for sure, and I can't remember whether they did Winter Soldier.
It really did feel like they were like leading the charge on the Marvel universe there, especially with the 2 Avengers films there. Like those were
Infinity War and
films.
Endgame.
The Gray Man, I mean, this is an interesting film. It was released in theaters, and then a week later, it's on Netflix. It stars Ryan Gosling, Chris Evans, Anna de Armas, and Jessica Henwick.
Hey, and Billy Bob Thornton.
Billy Bob Thornton. Come on. You know what? He's way down. I'm just looking at the letterbox list here. It's like he's on the 3rd row of actors on this film.
Man.
But yeah,
back in the 90s, he would be in top billing in there.
Right?
What an age we live in.
It's funny. I had my thought when he showed up on screen and was delivering some of his lines is I had recently watched Armageddon for our Michael Bay project. And he just had like the exact same delivery going on from, that 1998 film to what he was doing here. And it's like, to me, it really didn't feel like he cared about being in this movie at all. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not familiar with his work or his style. But I think we were talking about this a little before earlier as well. It's like Ryan Gosling didn't seem like he was that into this movie on screen either in a few parts.
Okay,
right?
so first of all, comment on that budget. Like, if that was a $200 million movie, I'm sorry, but like, this is pretty obviously some kind of embezzling scheme,
right?
Some kind of money laundering scheme. Because like the $200 million doesn't show up on screen.
The only thing I can think of is that maybe they did a lot of on-location shooting. Like every 10 minutes they were filming, they would travel to a different country, and it's like, did they move the whole production?
Half it looked like it was green screen anyway, so like the might as well have been on a green screen. Like, so weirdly framed shots with like 2 characters in the foreground and everything going on in the background. And I was like, is this a green screen or is it not? It was like a weird, surreal feel. Not every scene. Some scenes looked okay.
Some scenes were okay.
And some scenes just like, I'm not usually one to notice cinematography, but a lot of it looked like very kind of flat, very, very fake, very plasticky, very fake, very like the images seemed so one-dimensional. There wasn't a lot of depth to them. I'm not sure whether it was lens or the composition of the actual shots.
Well, the cinematographer here, Stephen F. Winden. Okay. You might be familiar with some of his movies, including, it looks like 5 or 6 of the Fast and the Furious films.
Really?
Sonic the Hedgehog, a few horror movies, but including like going way back, it looks like he did The Postman as well from way back in the day. But
it's too bad.
Yeah. I mean, do you think his action in this movie was comparable to action scenes from the Fast and the Furious films? Like Fast 7?
I'm kind of biased too. I love the Fast and the Furious franchise, but like a lot of those movies, like the action is like the best part. You can tell like everything's layered. Everything looks really well, especially the ones that Justin Lin directed, was kind of like peak Fast and Furious. Like everything looks really, really good. So like, I don't know if maybe it was the directors or the editing. I don't know. Like
something just did not add up in this film, and it was kind of a bore to watch. Like for me, this was like this great example of a North American mediocre action film, like a modern 2020s action film. I was like, nothing really clicked here for me. Did anything at all click for you on this movie? Was there anything stand out to see here?
I mean, Ryan Gosling's character was kind of, and the whole like Born Identity secret organization.
Yeah.
Kind of was kind of interesting, but it
just felt like played out to me at this point.
Well, it was nothing fresh, and like Ryan Gosling's character almost felt like a watered down version of his character from Drive, almost, where he was like this quiet kind of badass. But in this one is like, I don't know, like none of the characters were given any real backstory. Like the main villain, the CIA director there, he was just like, from this first scene is like, oh yeah, he's just evil. It's like he's angry and he wants to like assassinate the target. Like, well, there's a kid in the way. It's like, I don't care, kill the kid too. It's like, okay, well, I guess this bad guy's the bad guy. I mean, there's like no right. Ramp up given. Is like, I felt like there was a couple scenes at the beginning missing where it's like, oh, are you going to introduce this character? It's like, no, he's just a jackass.
You just have to accept all the things like that at face value in this film. And like, so that like corrupt CIA director, he basically employs Chris Evans' character. I think his name is Lloyd.
Yeah, he's an independent contractor employed by the CIA.
And he's just the absolute worst person in the world. Like, he really does not care about killing innocent people. He doesn't care about killing cops, military people. Like, he stops at nothing. So the CIA basically give him a blank check to track down our title character, Gray Man, Ryan Gosling. Sierra 6 is his code name. And he basically has a USB drive which has a bunch of data on it that's like very compromising
for that CIA director, not
for the CIA director, for nobody else. It's just going to put him in jail. But that's basically the film, and it goes way over the top of like Lloyd being bad, and you'll have to bear with us for a second here, because we talked about this before recording.
Yeah,
where we have met, and I want to repeat it here. We have talked about, you know, the stereotypical, like, over-the-top, mustachio twirling villain, right? In some movies, and how it's nice that movies either avoid that or they fall prey to it. And in this movie, Chris Evans' character, Lloyd, does have one of the worst mustaches to a point where, like, the main character is making fun of him for it. And here it is. He's literally twirling his mustache if it was long enough, right?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, though, I don't think they went far enough, because they describe this character as a sociopath, but he's like, he seems kind of reserved for a sociopath. Like when there's a torture scene, but it doesn't get too torturous. Everything was like so PG, right?
You know what? I'll admit I had to look away from that scene. I couldn't watch it. They pulled out the pliers and the toenails, and that was it for me.
Compare that to, what was it, Sierra? Oh, what was the one with George Clooney?
Syriana.
Don't ever correct me again, Brian. Yeah, Syriana. Syriana, there was another scene where George Clooney's character was getting his same torture. They were tearing out his fingernails. But that one is like, I felt that afterwards. Like, Billy Bob Thornton's reactions didn't really make it feel like he was getting his nails pulled out.
That's another reason where it's just like, was he acting for this movie?
Everything
like,
felt,
what happened here?
Again, like the action felt weightless. Like that big set piece battle on that giant CGI trolley car or train in the city. It felt so CG and felt so weightless. When the big crash is supposed to be epic, and it's just like, this is really like obviously CG. Didn't feel anything inside.
Yeah,
it was like this, watching this movie, I felt dead inside.
You did.
Like there's no emotional weight behind it.
If you had emotion going into this movie, it was drained out of you by the end of the 128-minute runtime.
Yeah,
right?
It felt every single minute of that runtime. But yeah, like the characters were paper thin. The plot, it made sense only in the fact that they needed the next scene to happen. At one point, Ryan Gosling's character is this amazing assassin who's like a ghost, except when he gets caught by 3 different people within 3 hours. So it's like, if they need him to be a ghost, he's a ghost. If they need him to be a bumbling, incompetent fool who's caught by a photographer then
that was kind of, I mean, they even like telegraph that scene, like he knows something's
God.
up and is like, he keeps just falling into the guy's trap. But presumably writer thought of this crazy escape scene and like a bit of an action scene afterwards. They just needed an excuse for him to get into that.
Yeah.
And that's the only way, is for him to be kind of dumb for a few
In
minutes.
one scene, Ryan Gosling takes on 20 bad guys and dispatches them with ease, but then Ana de Armas or Chris Evans, it takes him, like they incapacitate him instantly. Go for it.
Well, she shoots like a dart into each of them, right? It's just like, how did these two master assassins get taken down by a secret dart to the butt?
Yeah.
But can I ask a question here?
Sure.
Lloyd kidnaps Billy Bob Thornton's niece and is basically coercing him into helping Billy Bob find Sierra 6, Ryan Gosling. And one of the things the photographer does is able to track down the serial number of the pacemaker that is in the niece. Do pacemakers have GPS units in them and whatnot? Did I get up for like a bathroom break and miss an explanation in the movie?
They did. They talked about this when they did the flashback scene halfway through. But also the whole this is the thing. That so many threads are introduced and then just like forgotten about. Like the girl, they make a big deal about, oh, she has a pacemaker. Doesn't affect the plot at all.
All it does is it acts as like a tracking device.
Yeah, which is like,
really.
I don't even know if that's even, does that make sense? I don't know. A, like, well, B, why would that guy give him, if he's trying to capture him, why would he give him the actual location?
Yeah.
Turns out he did.
Right.
It's like, I'll capture you and sell you off to be murdered, but I'll give you the actual real information you're looking for.
Yeah.
Weird. And then B, I don't know. What were we talking about? It's ridiculous and doesn't make sense anyway. Oh yeah, the threads that were dropped. The pacemaker thing never comes up. It's like, oh, okay. It's just as a tracking device. It's the stupidest thing I ever heard. And then B, the other big thread. There's a bunch of threads that are dropped, but the other big one is like the CIA director. There's like, oh, he's doing all this stuff, this illegal black ops stuff, and it's like, how's he getting away with this? It's like, oh, there's somebody above him who's helping him out. It's like, okay, so you're gonna introduce like a higher level, again, Bourne-esque kind of conspiracy. Yeah, they never mentioned that plot point again. It's like, oh
no, it's like clearly being held back for some kind of sequel or something where there's like an even bigger, badder CIA director.
The grayer man.
Like,
the grayer man and then the grayest man.
The grayest man.
But like, just like all these scenes, like Lloyd kidnaps the girls, like if he's a sociopath, like how is she still alive? How are any of these people still alive? Like after he's done with them, why doesn't he just kill them?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. The fight scenes are okay, but they're just like generic. And like, again, with the stupid, I think the Russo brothers must have watched Michael Bay, because they were doing the stupid shaky cam fast cut nonsense. So you can't actually see what's going on in the action scenes.
Yeah.
There's no weight to any of the hits. You can't see the action reaction.
I thought some of it was decent.
Some of it was
clever.
okay.
Like the main action set piece was probably, I don't know what city they were in, but it was that train scene, like the trolley scene, where there is a decent amount of like setup and payoff. Like he's taking down guys with the riot shields. He's able to use the riot shield here and there. He's pushing guys out of the thing. It's just like, it kind of works here and there. But one of the things, like it just delves into like the super unrealistic area where it's like they are fighting, like they are throwing grenade launchers at the gray man here. Like they're just shooting him with everything they could possibly, like it's a small army that Lloyd has gathered together and they're demolishing the city. It's just like
the plot
they're really losing me. And they really lose me with like the absolute brutality of the violence against like the police force. Because there's a bombing in a building and then the police show up in numbers and they just start killing everybody. It's just like,
yeah,
what?
I know, even with the, like obviously there's a lot of reckoning, in terms of the management of our police systems in the US and Canada. But just to throw policemen in, and this is not just with this film, but a lot of films, it's an issue with like as just like mindless kind of cannon fodder. There's something that doesn't sit right. Seeing law enforcement, like it's got to be tough as a police officer watching like these movies, and it's like police officers are so incompetent. They're just like the red shirts that we throw them in the middle of the mix just to get murdered, straight up murdered. And I was like, yeah, like that doesn't. It's weird, right?
it felt weird in this movie, and it's just like it doesn't help either that it suffers from this thing where all the villains and the police in this scenario are wearing like full riot gear, the full face mask. You don't get to see a single person's face. These are all stunt people, CGI people that they do not want to show their acting.
Yeah.
They don't want to show their faces. It's just like you're going to probably recycle the same 3 or 4 guys for every scene to get through this wacky
it feels like
action.
The Russo brothers had also recently watched the John Wick movies, because there was also that almost like element of like, oh, I'm putting a hit on this guy, and like all these other teams are gonna like be chasing after him, and like there's a bounty on his head.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because like right at the very beginning when the guy they assassinate, the other like Sierra 4, I think, has the necklace with the medallion, and my first thought, is this a John Wick like secret assassin tag? And it's not really, but they definitely delve into that. Like you get, hints of that kind of world going on with that assassination contract, to the point where like, the photographer, he's printed out like the wanted poster, like the bounty. He's going to get $10 million if he brings in the gray man himself. Right. It's just like, no, it was so
like there's a whole like weird, like connected underground of, it's just,
and it makes you realize when you get those impressions of movies like John Wick, like how much better those movies are in comparison. Like if you're going to try and have like an homage or imitate some other movie, you want to kind of like one up it a little bit or set yourself aside either through style or personality or something. But this movie doesn't really have either one of those. So you just think I should be watching John Wick instead of this.
Yeah, absolutely. The character suffered for huge plot armor. A couple of times it was weird where like the good guys had Lloyd, the bad guy played by Chris Evans, dead to rights, but they just tranked him and just left him alive. I was like, okay.
Yeah, which was very strange. Like this is the CIA operating here, like other countries, and it's like there's no reason why they can't just kill this guy outright.
Especially since by that point he had just like so botched the operation and led to all these civilian casualties. Is like, and then like, why not just like, you could have ended the movie there, or like ended your headaches there, a lot of them. Like, why did any of the characters do anything? I don't know, because the script said so in that specific scene. Like otherwise there was no clear motivation. And then like Ryan Gosling's character, like the whole backstory was like Billy Bob Thornton was a CAA director, and he had this idea. I was like, let's recruit, cons, convicted criminals, commute their sentence, but like, indebt them to us and train them to be assassins and stuff. And it turns out that Ryan Gosling's character, he was in jail because their dad was abusive and he was beating his brother and he killed him in self-defense, ended up going to jail for it. It's like, so even his backstory is like sanitized. It's like any reasonable person is like, of course they're going to defend their brother who's getting beaten by their dad. It's like, that's not a moral dilemma. Right. I mean, it's, being in that situation, obviously in real life is a moral dilemma, but like the storytelling perspective is like, that's not a gray area. You saved your brother's life. And it's like, they could have made him like, oh no, I murdered a bunch of people and then I was reformed afterwards. And then I, like became a better person. It's like, make him actually gray, like make him morally dubious. But it's like, no, he was a good guy from the start. It's like, okay,
yeah, well, and I mean, we're introduced to him from a jail cell. Like he's serving like 30 years for doing whatever, and they break him out of jail. Or sorry, not break him out. They recruit him into the CIA so to like commute his sentence to
Sierra program.
And it's just like, I mean, he's bad because he's in jail, but we don't really get a sense of how bad. And guess what? He's not bad at all. He was in jail for just for to make that scene look interesting, I guess. I don't know.
God, I miss the old Treadstone days.
Yeah, honestly. Like it was just, there's so much more depth to something like this. And this like, definitely has echoes of the Bourne identity of just like, oh, this guy is like, he's fantastic at disappearing into the crowd. He can move from country to country, but Sierra 6 can't. Like he's not on the Jason Bourne level, but you kind of get everyone talks about him like he is.
Yeah, he's not even on the Aaron Cross level. Come on.
Who's Aaron Cross?
He was the Bourne Legacy, the character from the Bourne Legacy.
Oh, okay. I think
poor Jeremy Renner. He was Hawkeye, and his Aaron Cross is like, who's that again? Who are you? Arrow guy.
Arrow guy. Oh man. I mean, honestly, when I first saw The Gray Man, like the poster or whatever, I was like, oh, we're going to get a supernatural horror movie with Ryan Gosling in it. And then I get this weird, mediocre action film. I was a little disappointed.
Yeah, you waste Jessica Henwick. You have, and I'm going to apologize to all the Ana de Armas fans out there.
You be careful with this.
Whatever other, she's a fine actor, but I don't buy her as an action star. At least not the way the choreography was done in this movie, whereas like she looks like she's 90 pounds soaking wet, and she's fighting guys who are like 220. And it's like she punches somebody and they go flying. It's like in the real world, like somebody like her size would never be able to go toe to toe with somebody Chris Evans' size.
Well, you had a good comparison for this, right? Because you were talking earlier about this and how someone similar in stature like Black Widow, Scarlett Johansson, it's like her fighting is much more believable in how she uses her body, right? I remember you mentioning that.
Yeah, they played it up. It's like, it's still, even like Black Widow, it's like highly stylized for the comics, but like, I could reasonably see, it's reasonably, like the suspension of disbelief is there was like, she's using her whole body to choke this guy out or slam him to the ground. It's like, yeah, I could reasonably see how she could take down somebody by doing other tactics as opposed to just standing there and like trading punches with somebody twice your size, right? Like,
is that the fighting in this wasn't really creative. It wasn't like innovative. And I think if they applied like an innovative fighting style to her, it'd be more believable, right? And even the Gray Man himself needed to do things a little bit differently to be a little more interesting. It's like Jason Bourne fighting a guy with a book. That was innovative fighting. It's like, we're excited about this. Even with the shaky cam, we understand that he's punching a guy in the throat with a book, and that's going to really hurt. But that sort of thing doesn't really happen in this movie. There's nothing interesting going on.
Ryan Gosling's character is awesome. You know how they, you know how I know he's awesome? Because everybody keeps saying how great he is. It's like, this guy's really good at what he does. He's really good at what he does. It's like, how about instead of selling us that, how about you just like show us how good he is at stuff instead of like he botched the only job we saw him do, he botched it. He got the guy, but tons of civilian casualties. They say he's a ghost, but he gets caught by everybody super easily.
But man, he had some cool jackets through the movie.
He did have some cool jackets.
And the other comparison I want to throw out there, because you mentioned Anna, I mean, she was in the latest James Bond movie, No Time to Die.
Sure.
And her action was a lot more believable in that, I think. But I think she had like a better character in that movie as well, even though she wasn't in it a whole lot.
When you see like somebody with 90 pounds can pull a trigger and beat somebody who's 225, no problem, right? It's like, sure, give her a gun, give her some kind of advantage. But like that, the fighting was like, how are you going to, Ana de Armas, I'm 215. Like you're going to tell me you can flip me over? You can grab my arm and flip me? It's like, no, there's no way in heck I'm losing the fight to Ana de Armas based on what I've seen in that movie. But sorry.
The bigger comparison I wanted to make was like the action between Gray Man and No Time to Die. Like even for our title hero, James Bond, and like the car seats and stuff, like they just seem to carry a lot more story element, a lot more emotional weight to them,
a lot more physical weight. Like the physics actually, even in No Time to Die, and like James Bond, you're talking about generic action franchises. Like James Bond is feeling pretty generic, but even in No Time to Die,
there's some good style in that movie. Like I can't get that. Remember that scene where he's driving up with a motorcycle up the staircase and he flies over the railing. And it's just like, it was shot beautifully. There's a lot of good stunt going on there, and I can't stop thinking about that scene.
Or even the scene afterwards.
There's not a single thing in The Gray Man that I'm going to think about.
In No Time to Die, when they're in the car and the car's getting shot up with like bulletproof glass, and they're about to break through, it was like you can feel the impact of those gunshots on that insanely unrealistically durable car, but like you feel the weight of the violence of the hits, or when they're having physical fist fights, you feel people getting hit. But in this one is like, it was all kind of weightless. It was just like, I didn't feel like, never felt like anyone was in real danger. It felt like sparring matches in the local dojo. It was like,
man. So, I mean, Where do you land on your rating on a film like this?
I don't know. I'm just so tired of these like Netflix direct to video,
direct to streaming. Yeah.
Like I'm so.
They tried to pull a fast. I'll be honest with you. I saw this, like the trailer, and be like, oh, that looked okay. And then it's coming in theaters. Like, oh, okay, well, maybe I will go to the theater to see this. And then finding out it's on Netflix a week later, like, deflated my enthusiasm to watch this.
It's like, I don't know how they got that deal worked through. That's crazy.
Yeah. And I think it was just a Netflix film that they're just like, yeah, let's push it out there, get a few bucks, and we'll be interested to see what kind of box office it pulled in 1 week's time. But maybe if that was only like a local market type of thing, like worldwide, it probably just went straight to streaming. Because I think a similar thing happened with Annihilation years ago, where it got released in theaters while it also got released like worldwide straight to Netflix. And I hate to bring up Annihilation because it's one of my favorite films in the context of this very, very mediocre
I was going to say, like, Annihilation is an amazing film.
But, like, they are irrelevant, I guess, in the sense of, like, their way of being released.
Right, okay.
So, yeah, I don't know. I ended up just giving this a 2.5 star because I just didn't feel like anything else.
Honestly, like, if I had to rate this, it would be, like, 1.5 to 2. I mean, I'm just tired of, like, the bar is so low now. Like 2.5 is like bare minimum. They didn't even do bare minimum. Like there was so much. It was just like, I can't believe. Like, I will say I'm glad that we got those 2 Avengers movies out of the Russos when we did, and that they were so good, because like after seeing this,
here's what needs to happen. We talked about Michael Bay a few weeks ago and how some of his smaller budget stuff of like $40-50 million was starting to excel, and you got like better stories out of them, and like sort of clawed back action, and everything was better in some of the smaller budget. It's like the Russo brothers have been working with hundreds of millions of dollars now on their movies. We need to see them do a $40 million Netflix action movie, and see what they can push out there. And I think it would be better for what we got here.
Yeah, like something doesn't feel right. That's why I'm like, I was only half joking about the whole like money laundering thing, because like unless it was like for the salaries of the people involved, maybe, because I know like it's different with like negotiating salaries with Netflix is different than with traditional movie releases, because like the residuals don't function the same way in Netflix obviously as they do with box office. So like they're getting paid more up front, and Netflix for a Netflix movie or Netflix production makes sense because you're not going to have the box office residuals to compensate for smaller upfront. So maybe Chris Evans and Ryan Gosling accounted for, did they account for what? Maybe they're worth $100 million each. Like $200 million. Like I can't think of a single reason. And it's not on, this is the same. It's like Wonder Woman 1984 syndrome, where it's like, where did that money go? It's not on the screen, that's for sure. It's not in the production value.
Yeah. So I'm just doing a quick look up here, and I apologize if I'm like changing course on
Yeah, no, like you can't even follow along when we're talking. How can you expect our audience to pay attention?
It's true. It's true.
You're online looking at something else.
I forgot I was on Reddit for a little bit. Were we still recording?
The old Reddit. It'll suck you in no matter where you are. So
I'm reading here. The theatrical release on this was 400 theaters.
That's it?
Yeah, and 400 theaters. It made, so Netflix doesn't reveal how much it made, but they're saying distribution insiders estimated the film made around $200,000 from about 400 theaters in its opening weekend, which is, I mean, 400 theaters is not, I mean, I can't even think in terms of how small that is. Normal blockbusters are released in about 3,000 or 4,000 theaters.
Yeah, so
in
multiply
North America
multiply that by 10 essentially. So what is that, like $2 million opener?
Yeah. It's not that great. Review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes, we mentioned, is 50% of critics' ratings are positive. They give it an average rating of 5.6, and on Letterboxd, it uses the 5-star rating scale, and its average among its users, of which I think 55,000 people have logged it so far since release, is at a 2.8.
How is it that high? Like, to me, like something like The Adam Project was perfectly mediocre, and this to me fell below The Adam Project.
You know what? I think you're right. It's just like I can't remember what I rated the Adam Project, but it had a lot more like heart to it than something like this. This one felt kind of detached a bit.
It wasn't great. Actually, I think I gave that one, I think Adam Project, I think I actually gave like 3 stars. It was a little bit, it had more heart than I was expecting. Yeah. But this one was like, there was no emotion afterwards. I felt, there was nothing going on.
Like to give you an idea, like Letterboxd here, there's very few ratings at 4.5 or 5 stars. There's 13,000 ratings at 3 stars. 28% is the most. That's 28% of people logging it.
Okay.
Gave it 3 stars, which would basically push it up there. And then after 3.5 stars, the numbers just fall off a cliff. And it's just like, it's not like a bell curve going on here.
For the level of talent, like I expect something from the Russo Brothers. I expected it's better than this. Maybe it's the material. Maybe it's the budget. Maybe take the scale down, give them a more straightforward, more focused story. I don't know who the writing credits were on this, but yeah, something doesn't add up here. The math, the film math, there's some numbers missing there. There's some creative accounting going on, I think.
So there's a few writers. Christopher Marcus and Joe Russo look like they wrote it. There's a couple other writers, but Christopher Marcus wrote all the Captain America movies and the Avengers, Infinity War and Endgame. He wrote Thor. He wrote the Chronicles of Narnia films, and Pain and Gain from Michael Bay.
That's crazy because usually the Captain America movies are some of my favorite movies in the MCU, so I'm surprised.
And Stephen McFeely was another writer, and he's written all the same movies, all the Captain America, Narnia movies, Pain and Gain as well. So it's just like, this is a writing team that's going around here.
So it's like, I don't know, Matt. Maybe all the Kevin Feige, like all of the talks of him being like this guru, maybe it's true, man. Maybe he was the magic ingredient that really tied the production together.
Yeah, there's a lot of producers on this movie. And I think it was based on a book as well from the mid-2000s. So I'm kind of curious if there's like a whole series of like spy novels with Sierra 6 as the main character in it. Well, I'm glad we can move on from that movie. And as I was logging that, I had to make sure to log it right away after I watched it. I usually wait a day or two before I log it on Letterboxd. I was like, I'm going to forget I watched this movie. Like next week, I'll have no memory of the Gray Man. He's that elusive.
Yeah. The best disappearing act he pulled was disappearing from my memory the moment that movie was over, because he was the whole movie was so forgettable. So maybe he was the best at what he does, because he can disappear in our own minds.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Reel Film Chronicles podcast. Thank you for listening and hanging out with us today. We really appreciate your support and look forward to you joining us for the next episode. We can be found around the internet and social media, with our home base being realfilmchronicles.com, which will have all the links you need to follow and keep in touch with us. Until next time, take care of yourself and others, and keep your film journey going.